Think about your favorite food. Seriously, picture it right now. Can you see it? Maybe you can smell it? Is your mouth starting to water just a little bit? Now think about the person you love most in this world. Feel that warmth, that connection. Okay, now try to remember the lyrics to a song you haven't heard in years. Are they popping into your head? Everything you just did, smelling, feeling, remembering it, all happened inside a 3-pound chunk of wrinkly, fatty tissue sitting inside your skull. It's the single most complex object we have ever discovered in the universe, not on the planet, in the entire known universe. And you have one. It's you. It's the thing that is currently processing the sound of my voice, turning it into language, and deciding whether or not this is interesting. That, right there, is the human brain. And for the next little while, we are going on the ultimate tour. It's an internal expedition into this incredible, mysterious, and powerful organ. So what is it, really? It's on a basic level. The brain is your command center. It controls your thoughts, your memories, your movements, and every single process that keeps you alive, from your heartbeat to your breathing. Most of which you never, ever have to think about. It's made of about 86 billion nerve cells, called neurons. To put that number into perspective, there are more neurons in your brain than there are stars in our Milky Way galaxy. That is not an exaggeration, and it gets crazier. Each of those 86 billion neurons can form connections with thousands of other neurons, creating a network of trillions of connections or synapses. The number of possible pathways of possible thoughts in that network is a number so large it's practically meaningless. It's more than the number of atoms in the known universe. So when people say you have a universe inside your head, they're not being poetic, they're being literal. Now looking at the brain from the outside, it looks a bit like a giant oversized walnut. It's got two distinct halves, the left and right hemispheres, and its surface is covered in all these folds and grooves. These wrinkles are super important. They're a clever evolutionary trick to increase the surface area of the brain, allowing us to pack more cognitive firepower into a skull that can still fit through a birth canal. If you were to flatten out an adult human brain, its surface area would be about the size of a large pizza. This wrinkly outer layer is called the cerebral cortex. This is the part of the brain we think of when we think of thinking. It's the center of high-level thought, language, reason, and consciousness. It's the new, fancy upgrade in the animal kingdom, and it's what makes us uniquely human. The cortex is generally divided into 4 main sections, or lobes, each with its own set of specializations. Think of them like different departments in a massive, incredibly efficient company. Up at the front, right behind your forehead, you have the frontal lobe. This is the CEO, the boss. It's in charge of planning, decision-making, problem-solving, and your personality. It's the part of you that stops you from eating the entire cake or telling your boss what you really think. Behind that, at the top of your head, is the parietal lobe. This is the navigation and sensory department. It processes touch, temperature, pain, and pressure. It's also crucial for spatial awareness, knowing where your body is in space without having to look. It's how you can scratch an itch on your back without a mirror. On the sides of your head, right around your ears, are the temporal lobes. Think of these as the library and the audio department. They are responsible for processing what you hear, understanding language, and are heavily involved in forming and retrieving memories. And finally, at the very back of your head, is the occipital lobe. This department has one primary, all-consuming job: vision. It takes the raw information coming from your eyes and turns it into the rich, detailed, three-dimensional world you see around you. So we have the CEO, the navigator, the librarian, and the movie director. Over the course of this journey, we're going to visit each of these departments. We'll go deeper, past the cortex, into the ancient, emotional parts of the brain, down to the brainstem that keeps us alive. We'll even zoom in to meet the individual workers, the neurons themselves, and witness the tiny electrical sparks that create every thought you've ever had. This isn't just an anatomy lesson. This is the story of us. It's the ultimate exploration of what it means to be human. So buckle up, because first we're heading to the corner office. We're going to meet the CEO, the frontal lobe. All right, welcome back to our tour of the brain. Last time we got the grand overview, the 30,000-foot view of this incredible organ. We talked about the 4 main lobes, the different departments of the company that is you. And today, we're starting at the top. We're walking into the executive suite, the command and control center, the part of your brain that makes you, well, you. We're talking about the frontal lobe, located right behind your forehead. The frontal lobe is the largest of the four lobes and the last part of the brain to fully develop. In fact, it isn't considered fully mature until you're in your mid-20s. This is why teenagers, with their still developing frontal lobes, are famous for their brilliant decision-making, like trying to skateboard off a roof. Their engine is powerful, but the brakes, the part that says, hey, maybe this is a bad idea, are still being installed. And those brakes are a huge part of what the frontal lobe does. If the brain is a company, the frontal lobe, specifically its most forward section called the prefrontal cortex, is the chief executive officer. It's responsible for what scientists call executive functions. This is a fancy term for a set of mental skills that help you get things done. It includes things like planning for the future, managing your time, paying attention, switching focus between tasks, and perhaps most importantly, impulse control. Ever talked yourself out of buying that expensive gadget you didn't really need? That was your frontal lobe. Ever held your tongue when you were angry, choosing your words carefully instead of just yelling? Thank your frontal lobe. It's the little voice of reason, the long-term planner that weighs future consequences against immediate gratification. It's the part of you that decides to study for the exam instead of binge-watching another series, even though the series seems so much more appealing right now. But the CEO does more than just plan and inhibit. It's also the seat of your personality, your sense of humor, your ambitions, your moral compass. The very essence of who you are is largely shaped and expressed through this region. And we have a dramatic and rather gruesome piece of medical history to thank for understanding this. Let me tell you about Phineas Gage. In 1848, Gage was a railroad foreman, known as a responsible, well-liked, and efficient worker. One day, a freak accident caused a 3-foot-long iron rod to be blasted straight through his head. It entered under his left cheekbone and exited through the top of his skull, destroying a large portion of his left frontal lobe. Miraculously, Gage survived. He could walk, talk, and his memory was intact. But he wasn't Gage anymore. His friends said he was no longer Gage. The polite, reliable man was gone. In his place was someone who was impulsive, profane, and unreliable. He couldn't hold down a job. His personality had completely changed. Phineas Gage's tragic story was one of the first real pieces of evidence that specific parts of the brain are responsible for specific functions, and that our personality isn't some mystical, ethereal thing. It's tied directly to the physical tissue of our frontal lobe. But there's another part to this lobe, tucked away at the very back of it. It's called the motor cortex. This strip of brain tissue is the puppet master. It controls all of your voluntary movements. When you decide to reach for a cup of coffee, your prefrontal cortex makes the decision, and then it sends the order to the motor cortex. The motor cortex then sends the specific signals down your spinal cord to the muscles in your arm and hand to execute that precise movement. What's amazing is that different parts of this strip are dedicated to different parts of your body. And the amount of brain real estate a body part gets isn't based on its size, but on how fine-tuned its movements are. So, your fingers and your lips, which require incredibly precise control, have huge areas of the motor cortex dedicated to them, while your back, which makes much broader movements, has a much smaller area. So, the frontal lobe is this incredible combination of a wise strategist, a moral guide, a personality shaper, and a master of motion. It's what allows you to set a goal, make a plan to achieve it, stick to that plan even when it's hard, and physically carry out the steps to get there. It's the reason you can learn a musical instrument, write a novel, or build a spaceship. It's the great conductor of the orchestra of your mind. But a conductor is useless without an orchestra. The CEO needs information from the other departments to make good decisions. It needs to know what's going on in the world. And for that, we need to visit our next department, the one that tells us where we are and what we're feeling.
Next thing, we're heading to the parietal.
Okay, so we've spent some time in the executive suite with the frontal lobe, the brain CEO that handles planning, personality, and decision-making. But a CEO can't make decisions in a vacuum. They need data. They need to know what's happening both inside the company and out in the world. And for that, we turn to our next major department, the parietal lobe. Located at the top and back of your head, just behind the frontal lobe? The parietal lobe is the brain's master navigator and sensory integration hub. If the frontal lobe is about deciding what to do, the parietal lobe is about understanding where you are so you can do it. Its world is all about space, location, touch, and integrating a flood of sensory information into a single, coherent picture of reality. Let's start with its most famous job, processing the sense of touch. Running along the very front edge of the parietal lobe, right next to the motor cortex of the frontal lobe, is a strip of tissue called the somatosensory cortex. This is the receiving dock for all sensations of touch, pressure, temperature, and pain from all over your body. Just like the motor cortex, this sensory strip is a map of your body, but it's a map of sensation, not movement. And also, just like the motor cortex, the map is distorted. The more sensitive a body part is, the more brain area is dedicated to it. This is why a paper cut on your fingertip feels so much more intense and precise than a scrape on your back. Your fingertips and lips are packed with nerve endings, and they have a massive representation in the somatosensory cortex, making them incredibly sensitive. This map is so detailed that if a scientist were to gently stimulate a specific spot on your somatosensory cortex with an electrode, you would feel a tingle in the corresponding part of your body, say your left thumb even, though nothing is actually touching it. Your reality of touch is created right there in that strip of brain. But the parietal lobe does so much more than just feel things. Its real magic is in integration. It takes the information from the somatosensory cortex, combines it with visual information from the occipital lobe and auditory information from the temporal lobe, and uses it to build a dynamic three-dimensional model of the world around you and your place in it. This is your sense of spatial awareness. It's what allows you to walk through a crowded room without bumping into people. It's how you can reach into your bag and pull out your keys without looking. Your parietal lobe knows the shape of the keys. It knows the position of your hand, and it guides your hand to the target. It's constantly calculating distances, angles, and trajectories. When you catch a ball, your parietal lobe is doing lightning-fast physics, calculations to predict the ball's path and guide your hand to the right place at the right time. You don't have to think about the math. It just does it. This part of the brain is essentially home to the where pathway. It's constantly asking and answering the question, where is that object in relation to me? This is crucial for navigation. Whether you're refining your way around a new city or just walking from your bedroom to the kitchen in the dark, your parietal lobe is your internal GPS. People who have damage to certain parts of their parietal lobe can develop some truly bizarre conditions. One is called homeospatial neglect. If the damage is in the right parietal lobe, the person might completely lose awareness of the left side of space. Not that they can't see it, their eyes work fine, they just don't pay any attention to it. They might only eat the food on the right side of their plate, only shave the right side of their face, or only draw the right side of a clock. They have lost the mental concept of left. Another fascinating aspect of the parietal lobe is its role in connecting symbols to meaning. For example, it helps you understand that the shape 5 represents the concept of 5. It's involved in reading, writing, and mathematics, all of which rely heavily on manipulating abstract symbols in space. So, think about it. The parietal lobe is this silent, tireless worker that builds your entire physical reality. It takes a chaotic storm of sensory data, touch, sight, sound, and weaves it into a seamless, stable world that you can navigate and interact with. It's the stage on which the CEO, the frontal lobe, can make its decisions. Without it, you wouldn't know where your own hand ends and the rest of the world begins. You'd be lost in space. Now we know what to do, and we know where we are. But our world is also filled with sounds, with language, and with memories of the past. To understand those, we need to visit the department that holds our personal history and interprets the soundtrack of our lives. Next up, we're heading down to the temporal lobes. We visited the CEO in the frontal lobe and the navigator in the parietal lobe. We have a sense of purpose and a sense of place. But our experience of the world is so much richer than that. It's filled with conversations, music, the faces of people we know, and a deep well of memories that inform every moment. To understand where these crucial elements of our humanity come from, we need to travel to the sides of the brain, to the areas tucked right behind our temples. Welcome to the temporal lobes. If the frontal lobe is the CEO and the parietal lobe is the navigator, think of the temporal lobes as the company's library, archives, and audio-visual department all rolled into one. They are fundamentally involved in hearing, understanding language, and perhaps most famously, the formation and retrieval of long-term memories. Let's start with the most obvious function, given their location right next to your ears. Processing sound. All the auditory information from your ears is sent directly to a region in the temporal lobe called the primary auditory cortex. This is where raw sound signals are processed. But it's not just about detecting noise. It's about making sense of it. The temporal lobe helps you distinguish between the sound of a violin and the sound of a siren, to recognize a friend's voice in a crowded room, and to perceive the rhythm and melody in music. It's the brain's DJ and sound engineer, mixing and interpreting the soundtrack of your life. Within this sound processing hub, on the left side for most people, lies a critically important area called Wernicke's area. This is one of the brain's primary language centers. It's not about producing speech that's handled by another area called Broca's area up in the frontal lobe. Wernicke's area is about understanding language. It's the part of your brain that is working right now to decode the sounds I'm making and assign meaning to them. It's your internal translator. When this area is damaged, a person can develop what's known as Wernicke's aphasia. They can still speak fluently with perfect grammar and intonation, but their words are a jumbled mess, a word salad that makes no sense. And crucially, they can't understand what others are saying to them either. It's as if their dictionary has been completely scrambled. They can hear the words, but the meaning is gone. But perhaps the most fascinating and mysterious role of the temporal lobes is their connection to memory. Tucked deep inside each temporal lobe is a seahorse-shaped structure called the hippocampus. The hippocampus isn't where memories are stored for the long term. That seems to happen in a distributed way all over the cortex. Instead, the hippocampus is the gatekeeper. It's like the save button for your life experiences. It takes your short-term working memories, what you had for breakfast. The name of the person you just met begins the process of consolidating them into lasting, long-term memories. The story of a patient known as HM, or Henry Malazan, taught us almost everything we know about this. To treat severe epilepsy, doctors removed most of HM's hippocampi on both sides of his brain. The surgery worked, his seizures were gone, but he was left with a devastating side effect. He could no longer form new long-term memories. He could remember his childhood and everything up to the surgery perfectly well. He could hold a conversation, but if you left the room and came back 5 minutes later, he would have no memory of ever meeting you. He was trapped in the present moment, his life a series of disconnected experiences that would fade away almost instantly. Interestingly, HM could still learn new skills. He could learn to trace a star in a mirror, and he would get better at it each day, even though he had no conscious memory of ever having done the task before. This showed us that there are different types of memory, and the hippocampus is specifically crucial for creating new declarative memories of facts and events. Beyond memory and language, the temporal lobes are also involved in facial recognition. There's a specific area that seems to be highly specialized for identifying faces. This is why you can instantly recognize a friend you haven't seen in 10 years, even if they look different. It's also involved in linking emotions to memories, thanks to its close connection with another deep brain structure called the amygdala. That's why a certain song or smell can instantly transport you back to a powerful emotional moment from your past. So, the temporal lobes are our storytellers. They process the sounds of our world, give them meaning through language, and then use the hippocampus to file away our experiences, creating the rich tapestry of memory that makes up our life story. They give us our past, which allows the frontal lobe to plan for our future. We've now covered planning, navigating, and remembering. But there's one enormous piece of our experience missing. The most dominant sense for most humans. We need to see the world. For that, we have to go to the very back of the brain, to a lobe dedicated entirely to the magic of sight. Next time, we visit the occipital lobe. All right, team. Our journey through the brain continues. We've met the CEO in the frontal lobe, the navigator in the parietal lobe, and the storyteller in the temporal lobe. Each one handles a critical part of our conscious experience. But now we're heading to the back of the bus, to a region that might seem unassuming, but is responsible for creating the most vivid, detailed, and all-encompassing part of our reality, our vision. Welcome to the occipital lobe, located at the very back of the brain. The occipital lobe is the smallest of the four main lobes, but it has a massive, singular obsession: sight. It is the brain's dedicated movie studio and visual effects department. Its job is to take the chaotic, jumbled stream of electrical signals coming from your eyes and transform them into the stable. It's a colorful, three-dimensional movie that you perceive as the world. Now, you might think, don't my eyes do the seeing? And the answer is, not really. Your eyes are like cameras. They collect light, focus it, and convert it into electrical signals. But those signals are just raw data. They're a mess of pixels, with no inherent meaning. It's the occipital lobe, sitting all the way at the back of your head, that receives this data stream and acts as the director, editor, and special effects artist, constructing everything you see. The journey starts in the primary visual cortex, an area at the very back tip of the occipital lobe. This is the first stop for visual information. But it doesn't see a whole picture, like a photograph. Instead, it has highly specialized neurons that respond only to very simple, specific things: a line at a particular angle, a flash of light, a specific color in a specific spot, or a bit of movement.
Ow.
It's breaking down the scene into its most basic possible components. Think of it like an artist's first sketch, just a collection of lines and edges. From there, the information is sent out to other areas in the occipital lobe and beyond, in two major pathways. This is where the real magic begins. One pathway, called the dorsal stream or the Ware pathway, heads up towards the parietal lobe, our navigator. This pathway is all about motion and spatial location. It answers questions like, where is that object? How fast is it moving? Is it coming towards me? This is the stream that lets you catch a baseball, dodge a moving car, or just reach out and accurately grab your water bottle. It's your action vision system, and it works incredibly fast, often unconsciously. The other major pathway is the ventral stream, or the what pathway. This one heads down toward the temporal lobe, our storyteller and librarian. This pathway is all about object recognition and color. It answers the question, what am I looking at? This is the stream that allows you to recognize that the object moving towards you is not just a moving object, but specifically a red car. It's what lets you identify a friend's face in a crowd, distinguish a cat from a dog, or read the words on a page. It's your perception vision system. This division of labor is incredible. You have one system for seeing what things are, and a completely separate system for seeing where they are and how to interact with them. And this separation is why some forms of brain damage can lead to such strange results. For instance, someone with damage to their what pathway might be able to perfectly reach out and grab a pen, demonstrating their where pathway is working, but be completely unable to tell you that what they are grabbing is a pen. Conversely, someone with damage to their where pathway might be able to identify the pen perfectly, but be completely unable to guide their hand to pick it up. The occipital lobe is also the reason optical illusions work. Illusions are fascinating because they exploit the shortcuts and assumptions your visual system makes. When it's trying to build a coherent picture of the world from incomplete data, your brain is always trying to guess what's out there based on past experience. Illusions are clever tricks that fool those guessing mechanisms, revealing the constructive, creative process that is constantly happening behind the scenes. Seeing isn't just a passive reception of information, it's an active creation. So, every time you open your eyes, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, your occipital lobe is working tirelessly. It's taking a flood of meaningless light signals, and in a fraction of a second, constructing a rich, meaningful, and seamless visual world for you to live in. It directs your inner cinema, a movie so realistic you forget you're even watching it. It's the artist that paints your reality. So far, we've explored the cerebral cortex, the great wrinkled outer layer responsible for our higher thought. But underneath this sophisticated surface lies a structure that's just as complex and vital, a master of a different domain. Next, we're going to meet the little brain, the artist of action, the cerebellum. We've spent the last few sessions exploring the four major lobes of the cerebral cortex, the seat of our consciousness, our thoughts, our perceptions. But tucked away underneath the back of the cortex, just behind the brainstem, is a structure that, while small in size, is an absolute powerhouse of complexity and function. It looks almost like a miniature, separate brain. In fact, its name literally means little brain. Today we're talking about the cerebellum. Don't let the name fool you. The cerebellum may only be about 10% of the brain's total volume, but it contains over half of the brain's total neurons. Yes, you heard that right. More than 50% of your brain cells are packed into this one small region. For a long time, scientists thought its role was relatively simple, but we now know it's a master of coordination, precision, and timing, not just for movement, but for thought as well. The cerebellum's most famous job is motor control. But it's not like the motor cortex, which initiates voluntary movement. The cerebellum doesn't issue the command to move. It acts as the quality control expert. It refines and coordinates the movements. Think of it this way. Your frontal lobe decides, I want to pick up that glass of water. The motor cortex sends out the basic signals to your arm muscles. The cerebellum then steps in and says, okay, let's make this smooth. Let's apply just the right amount of force, at just the right speed, so we don't knock the glass over or send it flying across the room. It's constantly receiving information from all over the body, from your muscles and joints about your body's position, and from your inner ears about your balance. It also gets a copy of the motor plan from the cerebral cortex. It then compares the intended movement with the actual movement and makes instantaneous corrections. It's a real-time error correction device. This is what allows you to perform smooth, coordinated actions without thinking about them. Riding a bike, playing a piano, typing on a keyboard, or even just walking without stumbling. That's all the cerebellum at work. It's the king of muscle memory. When you first learn a new physical skill, you have to concentrate intensely. Your cerebral cortex is heavily involved. But as you practice, the cerebellum gradually takes over, automating the process. It creates a program, a motor schema, for that action. Eventually, you can do it automatically, with grace and precision, freeing up your conscious mind to think about other things. People who have damage to their cerebellum have incredible difficulty with coordinated movements. Their actions become clumsy, jerky, and uncontrolled, a condition known as ataxia. They might struggle to walk in a straight line, overshooting or undershooting objects they try to reach for, and their speech can become slurred, because the fine muscle movements of the tongue and lips are no longer properly coordinated. It's as if the conductor of their body's orchestra has gone on vacation. But here's where it gets really interesting. In recent years, our understanding of the cerebellum has exploded. We now know that its role in fine-tuning and automating processes isn't limited to movement. It seems to be doing the same thing for our thoughts. It's connected not just to the motor cortex, but to all the high-level cognitive areas in the prefrontal cortex as well. Scientists now believe the cerebellum is involved in cognitive functions like attention, language, and emotional regulation. It helps to smooth out our thought processes just like it smooths out our movements. It might help us shift our attention fluidly from one task to another, or process language with the right timing and rhythm. It might even play a role in social skills, helping us navigate complex social situations smoothly and appropriately. Think about it. A witty comeback in a conversation requires perfect timing. Solving a complex problem often involves a fluid and intuitive manipulation of ideas. These cognitive gymnastics seem to have the cerebellum's fingerprints all over them. It's no longer seen as just the brain's athletic coach. It's also a cognitive coach, helping to make our thinking more efficient, automatic, and graceful. So this little brain is a true marvel. It's the silent partner to the cerebral cortex, the artist that takes the raw commands and turns them into elegant action and fluid thought. It's what gives us our physical grace and, quite possibly, a large part of our mental agility. It ensures that when the CEO makes a decision, the execution is flawless. We've explored the conscious brain and the master of coordination. But what about the things we never think about? The things that just happen. Our breathing, our heartbeat, our most basic survival instincts. For that, we have to go deeper to the most ancient and fundamental part of the brain. Next time, we journey into the brainstem. So far on our grand tour, we've explored the high-rise office buildings of the cerebral cortex and the sophisticated coordination center of the cerebellum. These are the parts of the brain that handle our complex thoughts, our graceful movements, and our rich perceptions. But beneath all of that advanced machinery lies the foundation, the power plant. The part of the brain that you almost never think about, but without which you wouldn't last more than a few minutes. Today, we're redescending into the basement of the brain, to meet the unsung hero of survival, the brainstem. The brainstem is the oldest and most primitive part of the brain, evolutionarily speaking. It's the structure that connects the sophisticated cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. If you picture the brain as a flower, the cerebrum would be the petals, and the brainstem would be the stalk. This is often why it's referred to as the reptilian brain, because it controls the most basic life-sustaining functions that all animals need. It's made up of three main parts, stacked on top of each other: the medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain. Let's take a look at each of them. At the very bottom, connecting directly to the spinal cord, is the medulla oblongata, or just the medulla. This small, unassuming bulge is the absolute life support center. It contains the control centers for your heart rate and your breathing. You don't have to remind yourself to breathe. You don't have to consciously command your heart to beat. The medulla handles it all automatically, 24/7, from the moment you're born to the moment you die. It also controls other automatic reflexes like swallowing, coughing, sneezing, and vomiting. Damage to this area is almost always catastrophic because it means the body's most fundamental life-sustaining systems shut down. The medulla is the quiet, tireless engineer in the basement, keeping the whole building running. Sitting just on top of the medulla is the pons. The word pons is Latin for bridge, and that's a perfect description of what it does. It acts as a major relay station, a bridge of nerve fibers connecting the cerebellum to the cerebral cortex. It's crucial for communication between the thinking brain and the coordinating brain, ensuring our movements are aligned with our intentions. But the pons has another incredibly important job. It plays a key role in sleep and dreaming. It helps regulate our sleep-wake cycles and is thought to be involved in generating the brain activity that leads to dreams. So, when you're deep in a vivid dream, you have the pons to thank for the show. Finally, at the top of the brainstem is the midbrain. This is a complex region that serves as another critical relay station, but this time for auditory and visual information. It helps to process some of this sensory information and is involved in controlling eye movements. Have you ever had your eyes automatically track a sudden movement in your peripheral vision? That quick, reflexive turn of your head and eyes is orchestrated by the midbrain. It's a primitive survival mechanism. It's designed to quickly orient you towards potential threats or opportunities without you having to consciously think about it. The midbrain also contains a large number of neurons that produce dopamine, a key chemical messenger involved in motivation, reward, and movement, but we'll talk more about that later. Woven throughout these three structures is a complex network of neurons called the reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS is like the brain's bouncer or consciousness switch. It's responsible for regulating our level of arousal and wakefulness. When you're asleep, the RAS is dampened down. When your alarm clock goes off in the morning, the RAS kicks into high gear, sending a wake-up signal to the entire cerebral cortex. It's also what filters incoming stimuli, helping you to pay attention to what's important and ignore what's not. It's the reason a parent can sleep through a loud thunderstorm, but wake up instantly at the quietest whimper from their baby. So, the brainstem may not be involved in writing poetry or solving calculus problems, doesn't have the glamour of the prefrontal cortex, but it is, without a doubt, the most essential part of your brain for sheer survival. It is the bedrock upon which all higher cognitive functions are built. It's the automatic pilot that handles the thousands of background processes that keep you alive. freeing up your conscious mind to worry about more important things like what to watch next. We've looked at the thinking brain, the moving brain, and the surviving brain. But what about the feeling brain? What about love, fear, anger, and joy? For that, we need to explore a collection of structures nestled deep in the center of it all. Next time we enter the emotional core, the limbic system. We've journeyed through the logical executive offices of the cortex, the precise coordination center of the cerebellum, and the life-sustaining power plant of the brainstem. We've seen how we think, how we move, and how we stay alive. But something is missing. What about the color, the passion, the driving forces behind our decisions? What about fear, pleasure, love, and anger? Today we're going to the very heart of the matter. We're exploring the emotional core of the brain, the limbic system. The limbic system isn't a single neat structure like one of the lobes. Instead, it's a collection of several interconnected structures nestled deep within the brain. Sitting on top of the brainstem and tucked underneath the cortex, the word limbic comes from the Latin for border, because these structures form a border between the ancient reptilian brainstem and the modern rational cerebral cortex. And that S a perfect description of its function. It's the bridge between our most basic survival instincts and our higher-level thoughts. It's the source of our emotions, our motivations, and it plays a massive role in memory. Let's meet the key players in this emotional inner circle. First up is the amygdala. The amygdala is a small, almond-shaped structure, and there's one in each temporal lobe. If the limbic system is the emotional core, the amygdala is the fire alarm. It is constantly scanning your environment for threats, for things that are important for your survival. It's the seat of fear, but it also processes other strong emotions like anger and pleasure. When you see something potentially dangerous, like a snake on a hiking trail, your amygdala springs into action before your conscious brain even has time to process what it's seeing. It triggers the classic fight-flight response, flooding your body with adrenaline, increasing your heart rate, and sharpening your senses. This is a powerful, life-saving mechanism. The problem is, the amygdala can be a bit overzealous. It's the source of anxiety and phobias. That feeling of dread when you have to speak in public. That's your amygdala hijacking your rational brain, screaming danger, even when there's no physical threat. Learning to manage fear and anxiety is really about learning to use your prefrontal cortex, the rational. CO2, calm down the hypervigilant amygdala. Next door to the amygdala is a structure we've already met, the hippocampus. We talked about it as the brain's save button for new memories. Its proximity to the amygdala is no coincidence. The brain is wired to remember emotionally charged events more vividly than neutral ones. This makes perfect evolutionary sense. You want to have a crystal clear memory of the place where you encountered that snake so you can avoid it in the future. The amygdala essentially flags a memory as important and tells the hippocampus to make sure it gets stored properly. This is why you can probably remember exactly where you were during a major world event or a moment of intense personal joy or fear. But you can't remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday. Now, let's talk about the hypothalamus. This is a tiny, tiny structure, about the size of a pea, located at the base of the brain. But its influence is immense. The hypothalamus is the brain's regulator. It's concerned with keeping your body in a stable, balanced state called homeostasis. It links the nervous system to the hormonal system. It controls your body temperature, your hunger and thirst, your fatigue, and your sleep cycles. It's the source of your most basic drives. When you feel hungry, that's your hypothalamus telling you that your body needs fuel. It's the ultimate survivalist, ensuring you do the things you need to do to stay alive and pass on your genes. And finally, we have the thalamus. The thalamus is like the grand central station for all of your senses, except for smell, which has its own special direct line. All the information coming from your eyes, ears, and skin first goes to the thalamus. The thalamus then acts as a relay operator, directing that sensory information to the appropriate areas of the cerebral cortex for further processing. Okay, this is visual info. You go to the occipital lobe. This is sound. You go to the temporal lobe. It's the gatekeeper of sensory perception, helping to decide what information is important enough to be sent up to the conscious brain. Together, these structures, the fearful amygdala, the remembering hippocampus, the driving hypothalamus, and the relaying thalamus form the limbic system. They create the rich, emotional, and motivational landscape of our inner world. They are what make us care about things. They provide the why for the what that the cortex does. Without the limbic system, we would be like robots, able to process information and execute tasks, but with no joy, no fear, no desire, and no reason to do anything at all. It's the engine of our humanity. Memory is so central to our identity that it deserves its own deeper look. Next time, we're going to revisit the hippocampus and explore the incredible, day-changing process of how we remember and learn. We just took a tour of the limbic system, the brain's emotional heart, where we briefly reacquainted ourselves with its star player in memory, the hippocampus. But the process of creating a memory, of learning something new, is so fundamental to who we are that it deserves its own dedicated exploration. Our memories are not just a record of the past. They are the very fabric of our identity. They shape our understanding of the world and guide our future actions. So today we're going to dive deeper into the incredible world of memory and learning. Let's start with a simple question. What is a memory? It's not a little video file stored in a specific spot in your brain. A memory is a pattern. It's a specific network of neurons firing together in a particular sequence. When you learn something new, you are physically changing the structure of your brain. You are strengthening the connections between certain neurons. The famous saying in neuroscience is, neurons that fire together, wire together. This physical change, this new or strengthened connection, is the memory. The process usually begins with sensory memory. This is an ultra-short-term buffer. For a fraction of a second, your brain holds on to everything your senses are taking in: the sights, the sounds, the feelings. Most of this information is irrelevant and is immediately discarded. It's just a fleeting echo. But if you pay attention to something, it gets promoted to short-term memory, or what is often called working memory. This is your mental scratch pad. It's what you're reusing right now to hold the beginning of this sentence in your mind long enough to understand the end of it. Working memory has a very limited capacity. It can only hold about 7 pieces of information at a time. Plus or minus 2, and it doesn't last long, maybe 15 to 30 seconds, unless you actively rehearse it. When you repeat a phone number to yourself over and over again to remember it, you're using your working memory. Now, for that information to become a permanent part of your knowledge base, it needs to be converted into long-term memory. And this is where our friend, the hippocampus, comes in. As we discussed, the hippocampus is not the storage cabinet. It's the librarian that catalogs and files the memories away. It takes the fragile, temporary patterns of short-term memory and, through a process called consolidation, helps to etch them into the cortex for long-term storage. This process doesn't happen instantly. It takes time and is particularly active while we sleep. This is one of the main reasons why a good night's sleep is absolutely critical for learning and memory. Your brain is literally busy filing away the important events of the day. We learned so much about this from the tragic case of Henry Malazan, or HM, after his hippocampi were removed. He was stuck. He had his long-term memories from before the surgery, and his short-term working memory was fine, but he had lost the bridge between them. He couldn't consolidate new experiences into lasting memories. His life was a constant present, with no new threads being woven into the tapestry of his mind. Long-term memory itself isn't one single thing. It's broadly divided into 2 types. First, there's explicit or declarative memory. This is the memory of facts and events, things you can consciously recall and declare. This type is further divided into semantic memory. Your memory for facts, like Paris is the capital of France. In episodic memory, your personal life story, like your memory of your first day of school. The hippocampus is essential for forming these types of memories. But then there's implicit or procedural memory. These are the memories of skills and procedures, the how-to memories. Riding a bike, tying your shoes, playing a guitar chord. These are things you learn through practice and can do automatically, without conscious thought. And as we saw with HM, this type of memory doesn't seem to depend on the hippocampus. It relies on other brain areas, primarily the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. This is why HM could learn new motor skills, even though he had no memory of the practice sessions. This entire process of learning and memory is possible because of a remarkable property of the brain called neuroplasticity. Your brain is not a fixed, static organ. It is constantly changing, reorganizing, and rewiring itself based on your experiences. Every time you learn a new fact, practice a new skill, or even just have a new thought. You are physically altering the connections in your brain. You are, quite literally, changing your mind. This is an incredibly hopeful and empowering concept. It means that learning, growth, and change are possible at any age. You can teach an old dog new tricks because the brain is built to learn. So, the next time you remember a cherished moment or finally master a new skill, take a second to appreciate the incredible biological dance that made it possible. You have activated a specific pattern of neurons, strengthened their connections, and added another thread to the unique, ever-changing tapestry that is you. So far, we've been talking about brain regions as if they are solid blocks. But what are they made of? Who are the individual workers in this massive company? It's time to zoom in, way in. Next time we meet the star of the show, the neuron. For this entire journey so far, we've been flying high above the landscape of the brain, looking at the grand continents of the lobes and the major cities of the limbic system. We've talked about what these regions do, but we haven't talked about how they do it. What does a thought actually travel from one place to another? What is the physical substance of an idea, an emotion, or a command to move? To answer that, we have to zoom in. We're moving past the big picture and putting the fundamental unit of the brain, the building block of thought itself, under the microscope. Today, we meet the neuron. The neuron, or nerve cell, is the star of the nervous system. As we said in the beginning, you have about 86 billion of them, and they are the cells that are specialized to transmit information. They are the messengers, the wires, the microprocessors of your biological computer. While they come in many shapes and sizes, a typical neuron has three main parts. First, there's the cell body, or the soma. This is the neuron's factory and headquarters. It contains the nucleus, where the cell's DNA is stored, and it's responsible for keeping the cell alive and functioning. Branching out from the cell body are structures that look like the branches of a tree. These are called dendrites. The word dendrite comes from the Greek for tree, which is a perfect description. The dendrites are the receivers. Their job is to listen, to pick up incoming signals from other neurons. A single neuron can have thousands of these dendritic branches, allowing it to listen to a huge number of neighboring cells. Then, extending out from the cell body in one long projection, is the axon. The axon is the transmitter. It's a cable that carries the neuron's own signal away from the cell body to send it to other neurons. Some axons are very short, only communicating with cells right next door. Others can be incredibly long. For example, the axons that control your big toe start in the base of your spine and run all the way down your leg. That's a single cell that can be over 3 feet long. So, you have the dendrites receiving signals, the cell body processing them, and the axon transmitting a new signal. But how does that signal actually work? That's where it gets really cool. The signal is an electrical impulse. Neurons are essentially tiny biological batteries. They maintain a small electrical charge across their membrane, with the inside of the cell being slightly more negative than the outside. This is called the resting potential. When the dendrites receive enough go signals from other neurons, it causes a rapid change in this electrical charge. Tiny channels in the cell membrane fly open, allowing positively charged ions to rush into the cell. This flips the charge for a millisecond. The inside of the cell becomes positive. A sudden electrical spike is called an action potential. It's the fundamental unit of information in the brain. It's the spark. This action potential doesn't just happen at the cell body, it travels. Like a wave or a line of falling dominoes, this spike of positive charge races down the entire length of the axon, all the way to its tip. It's an all-or-nothing event. The neuron either fires an action potential, or it doesn't. There's no such thing as a big or small action potential. It's like a light switch. It's either on or off. The strength of a message is conveyed not by the size of the spark, but by the frequency, how many sparks are fired in a given amount of time. To help this signal travel quickly and efficiently, many axons are wrapped in a fatty substance called the myelin sheath. Myelin acts like the plastic insulation on an electrical wire. It prevents the electrical signal from leaking out and allows it to jump down the axon at incredible speeds, up to 200 miles per hour. So we have this electrical signal this action potential that has now raced down the axon to its very end. But here's the catch. Neurons don't actually touch each other. There's a tiny, microscopic gap between the axon tip of one neuron and the dendrite of the next. This gap is called the synapse. So how does the electrical signal jump across this gap? It doesn't. The brain pulls off an even more amazing trick. When the action potential reaches the end of the axon, it triggers the release of tiny chemical messengers. These chemicals float across the synaptic gap and latch onto the dendrites of the next neuron, delivering their message. And this is where the real complexity and beauty of the brain happens. This is where learning occurs, where drugs have their effects, and where the true magic of information processing takes place. This process, this leap from an electrical signal to a chemical one and back again, happening trillions of times a second inside your head right now, it is the language of your brain. Every single thing you think, feel, can do is the result of these 86 billion messengers firing their tiny electrical sparks and passing chemical notes across trillions of tiny gaps. The synapse is so important, it deserves a chapter all its own. Next time, we're going to zoom in even further and explore that magical gap, the synapse. We got up close and personal with the neuron, the fundamental messenger of the mind. We learned how it generates an electrical spark, an action potential, that travels down its axon. But we ended on a cliffhanger. The action potential reaches the end of the line, but it finds a gap, a tiny space between it and the next neuron. This microscopic chasm is called the synapse, and it is arguably the most important location in the entire brain. Today, we're diving into that space, because what happens in this gap is the secret to everything. The synapse is the communication point. It's where the message is handed off from one neuron, the presynaptic neuron, to another, the postsynaptic neuron. But as we said, the electrical action potential can't jump this gap. So instead, the brain switches from an electrical language to a chemical one. At the very tip of the axon are tiny sacs called vesicles, filled with chemical molecules. These chemicals are the brain's alphabet. They are the neurotransmitters. When the action potential arrives at the axon terminal, it acts like a key, unlocking a gate that causes these vesicles to merge with the cell membrane and release their neurotransmitters into the synaptic gap. These neurotransmitter molecules then float across the tiny space and bind to specific receptor sites on the dendrites of the receiving neuron. These receptors are like locks, and each neurotransmitter is a specific key. When the key fits into the lock, it opens a channel on the receiving neuron's membrane. And here's where the message gets delivered. Depending on the type of neurotransmitter and the type of receptor, this can have one of two effects. It can be an excitatory signal, which means it tells the next neuron fire, pass the message on. It does this by allowing positive ions to flow in, making an action potential in that neuron more likely. Or it can be an inhibitory signal, telling the next neuron, don't fire, stop the message here. It does this by allowing negative ions to flow in, making an action potential less likely. Every single neuron in your brain is constantly performing a complex calculation. It's listening to thousands of incoming signals, both excitatory go signals and inhibitory stop signals. It adds them all up, and if the go signals outweigh the stop signals by a certain amount, it reaches its threshold and fires its own action potential, sending the message on down the line. It's a democracy of signals, and only a strong majority vote gets the message through. This system allows for an incredible amount of complexity and control, but it gets even better. There isn't just one type of neurotransmitter. The brain uses dozens of different chemical keys to send different kinds of messages. You've probably heard of some of the most famous ones. There's glutamate, which is the brain's main excitatory neurotransmitter. It's the workhorse, the primary go signal in the brain, essential for learning and memory. Then there's GABA, which is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the brain's stop signal, the calming influence that prevents neurons from firing out of control. It's like the brain's brakes. Dopamine is famously associated with pleasure and reward. When you eat a delicious meal, listen to great music, or achieve a goal, you get a little squirt of dopamine that essentially tells your brain that was good. Do that again. It's a powerful motivator, but it's also implicated in addiction. Serotonin plays a huge role in regulating mood, sleep, and appetite. Low levels of serotonin are linked to depression, which is why many antidepressant medications work by increasing the amount of serotonin available in the synapse. Acetylcholine is critical for muscle contraction. It's the neurotransmitter that your motor neurons release to make your muscles move. It's also vital for attention, learning, and memory. This is just a handful of them. Each of these chemical messengers has a different job, and the brain uses them in different pathways to create a symphony of effects. And this synapse, this chemical junction, is where the action is for neuroplasticity. When you learn something, the brain physically changes its synapses. It might release more neurotransmitters, or the receiving neuron might create more receptors, making the connection stronger and more sensitive. The synapse literally becomes more efficient. This strengthening of synaptic connections is the physical basis of learning and memory. It's also where most drugs that affect the brain do their work. Caffeine, for example, works by blocking an inhibitory neurotransmitter, essentially taking the brakes off your brain. Other drugs might mimic a neurotransmitter, block its uptake from the synapse so it has a stronger effect, or prevent it from being released in the first place. Every psychoactive substance, from alcohol to complex medications, has its effect by tinkering with the delicate chemical ballet happening in your synapses. So this tiny invisible gap is the stage for the most incredible drama in the universe. It's where electrical signals become chemical whispers, where go and stop signals battle for control, where memories are forged, moods are set, and our very consciousness is shaped. The space between our thoughts is just as important as the thoughts themselves. We've seen the big picture and the microscopic details. Now let's pull back out a bit and look at one of the brain's most famous, most misunderstood features: its two halves. Next time, we explore the left brain, the right brain, and the great divide. We've journeyed from the vast lobes down to the microscopic synapse and back. Now, let us address one of the most popular and persistent ideas in all of neuroscience: the idea of being left-brained, or right-brained. You've heard it a million times. Left-brained people are logical, analytical, and good at math. Right-brained people are creative, intuitive, and artistic. It's a neat and tidy way to categorize people. There's just one small problem with it. It's mostly a myth. You don't use only one side of your brain. Every complex task, whether it's solving a math problem or painting a picture, requires constant communication and collaboration between both hemispheres of your brain. The idea that you are dominated by one side is a massive oversimplification. However, like many good myths, it's rooted in a kernel of truth, and that truth is the concept of lateralization. While you use your whole brain, it's true that the two hemispheres are not identical. They do have specializations. Certain mental functions are primarily handled by one side or the other. This is lateralization. So let's break down what the science actually says about what each hemisphere is good at. The left hemisphere, for about 95% of right-handed people, is the language champion. It's where you'll find the two key language centers we've discussed: Broca's area for producing speech, and Wernicke's area for understanding language. It excels at processing information in a linear, sequential, and logical fashion. It's good at things like reading, writing, and calculations. It's the part of your brain that understands grammar and syntax. It's often considered the interpreter. It's a part of the brain that takes all the information coming in and constructs a coherent narrative to make sense of the world. The right hemisphere, on the other hand, is the master of the big picture. It processes information more holistically and spatially. It's superior at recognizing faces, interpreting emotional expressions, and understanding visual spatial relationships. If the left brain understands the words of a sentence, the right brain understands the tone of voice, the emotional context, and the body language that goes with it. It's crucial for understanding metaphors, sarcasm, and humor. It's also dominant for musical and artistic abilities, though again, a trained musician uses both hemispheres intensely. While the left side might process the rhythm and structure, the right side processes the melody and emotional feel of the music. So you can see where the myth comes from. Left is language and logic. Right is emotion and creativity. It's not wrong, but it's incomplete. They are not two separate brains working independently. They're two specialists working as a team. And how do they work as a team? How do these two halves communicate? They talk to each other through through a massive superhighway of nerve fibers that runs right down the middle of the brain, connecting the two hemispheres. This structure is called the corpus callosum. It's a thick bundle of about 200 million axons, and its sole job is to allow the left and right brains to share information constantly. Every fraction of a second, millions of signals are zipping back and forth across this bridge, ensuring that both hemispheres are fully integrated and aware of what the other is doing. We learned a ton about this from a fascinating group of patients from the mid-20th century, known as split-brain patients. To treat extreme, life-threatening epilepsy, these patients had their corpus callosum surgically severed. This drastic procedure stopped the seizures from spreading from one hemisphere to the other, and remarkably, in everyday life, these patients seemed almost completely normal. But clever experiments revealed the strange disconnection. Remember that the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body and processes vision from the right visual field, and vice versa for the right hemisphere.
Oh, yes.
In an experiment, a split-brain patient would be shown a picture of a key in their left visual field only. That information goes to their right hemisphere. If you ask them what they saw, they would say nothing. Why? Because the language center is in the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere didn't see the key. The information was trapped in the nonverbal right brain. But here's the amazing part. If you then ask them to reach behind a screen, pick up what they saw with their left hand, which is controlled by the right hemisphere, they would correctly pick up the key every time. The right brain knew, but it couldn't speak. It could only act. The left hand knew what the left brain did not. These experiments revealed that we essentially have two streams of consciousness. Two minds that are normally seamlessly woven together by the corpus callosum. When that connection is cut, they can operate with a startling degree of independence. So, forget the idea of being left-brained or right-brained. Instead, celebrate the fact that you have this incredible partnership in your head. You have a specialist for details and a specialist for the big picture. A linguist and an artist constantly collaborating across a biological superhighway to create your single, unified experience of the world. The real magic isn't in the hemispheres themselves, but in their symphony. Now, neurons get all the attention, but they're not the only cells in your brain. In fact, they outnumbered by a whole other class of cells that are the true unsung heroes of the nervous system. Next time, we're going to meet the brain's support staff, the glial cells. So far, our story of the brain has been all about the neuron, 86 billion superstar cells that fire the signals, form the networks, and create our thoughts. We've treated them like the only actors on the stage, but that's not the whole picture. For every star actor, there's a huge crew working tirelessly behind the scenes. The stagehands, security guards, the janitors, the caterers. In the brain, this essential support crew is a class of cells called glial cells. The word glia comes from the Greek word for glue. It's because early neuroscientists thought these cells were just passive filler, the stuff that held the important neurons together. We could not have been more wrong. Glial cells, it turns out, are dynamic and absolutely critical partners to neurons. And they actually outnumber neurons in many parts of the brain. For a long time, they were the dark matter of neuroscience, but we now know they are indispensable for a healthy, functioning brain. There are several different types of glial cells, each with its own specialized job. Let's meet some of the most important members of this support team. First, we have the astrocytes. These are the star-shaped cells, and they are the most abundant type of glia in the brain. Astrocytes are the ultimate multitaskers. They are like the brain's personal assistants and bodyguards. They provide physical support to the neurons, but they do so much more. They help to supply neurons with nutrients from the blood. They clean up waste products and excess neurotransmitters from the synapse, keeping the chemical environment perfectly balanced. They are also a key component of the blood-brain barrier, a protective filter that prevents harmful substances in your blood from entering the brain. Astrocytes form a tight seal around the brain's blood vessels, acting as very strict bouncers, only letting the right molecules through. But even more exciting, we're now discovering that astrocytes are not just passive helpers. They can actually listen in on synaptic communication and even talk back, releasing their own chemical signals that can influence how neurons fire. They are active participants in information processing. Next up, we have the microglia. These are the brain's dedicated immune system. Your body's normal immune cells are mostly blocked from entering the brain by the blood-brain barrier. So, the brain has its own resident security force and cleanup crew. Microglia are constantly on patrol, moving through the brain tissue, checking for signs of trouble. If they find damaged cells, debris, or invading pathogens like bacteria, they spring into action. They're scavenger cells, engulfing and destroying the threat. They are essential for keeping the brain clean and healthy. They also play a critical role in brain development by pruning weak or unnecessary synapses, helping to sculpt the brain's circuits into efficient networks. Then, we have a type of glial cell that is absolutely crucial for the speed of thought. These are the oligodendrocytes. Their main job is to produce myelin, the fatty substance that we talked about earlier. Oligodendrocytes wrap their cell membranes around the axons of neurons, forming the insulating myelin sheath. An oligodendrocyte doesn't just myelinate one neuron. A single one can wrap its arms around dozens of different axons, like an octopus hugging many ropes at once. This myelin sheath is what allows the action potential to travel so incredibly fast. In diseases like multiple sclerosis, MS, the body's immune system mistakenly attacks and destroys these oligodendrocytes. Without them, the myelin sheath degenerates, and the electrical signal in the neurons slows down or fizzles out completely. This is what leads to the wide range of debilitating symptoms associated with MS. The work of this one type of glial cell is absolutely vital for every fast communication in the brain. So, while neurons might be the flashy superstars that fire the signals, the glial cells are the ones who make the show possible. The astrocytes feed and protect them. The microglia clean up after them and defend them. And the oligodendrocytes make sure their messages are delivered at top speed. It's a beautifully intricate partnership. The brain isn't just a network of neurons. It's a rich and complex ecosystem of different cell types, all working together in perfect harmony. Without the tireless work of these silent partners, the glue of the brain, thought itself, would be impossible. We've now seen the brain's architecture and its cellular workers, but this incredibly delicate 3-pound organ needs to be protected from the outside world. It's the most important part of you, and nature has gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it safe. Next time, we're going to look at the brain's armor and life support system. Throughout this entire series, we've been exploring the inner workings of the human brain. We've talked about its delicate structures, its complex cells, and the fragile chemical ballet that creates our reality. But all of this incredible machinery is soft, squishy, and exceptionally vulnerable. It's essentially the consistency of firm tofu. So how does this priceless, delicate organ survive inside a body that runs, jumps, and occasionally bumps into things? The answer is that the brain resides within one of the most sophisticated and well-defended fortresses in the biological world. Today, we're exploring the brain's incredible protection system. The first line of defense is the most obvious one: the skull. Your cranium is a helmet of bone, a rigid, unyielding case designed to absorb the force of impacts and protect the brain from direct trauma. It's an amazing piece of natural engineering, but a hard case isn't enough. If your brain were just sloshing around inside your skull, every sudden head movement would cause it to smash against the bone, leading to constant injury. So, nature added a series of shock absorbers and a fluid suspension system. Between the hard skull and the soft brain are 3 protective membranes called the meninges. Think of them as layers of durable, protective wrapping paper around a precious gift. The outermost layer, right up against the inside of the skull, is called the dura mater. Dura mater is Latin for tough mother, and it is exactly that. It's a thick, leathery, and incredibly strong membrane that provides a tough outer barrier for the brain. It's the heavy-duty tarp that keeps everything secure. Below the dura mater is the second layer, the arachnoid mater. Arachnoid means spider-like, and it gets its name because it has these delicate, web-like projections that extend down to the layer below. It's a much thinner and more delicate membrane than the dura. And finally, the innermost layer, which clings directly to the surface of the brain. Following every single one of its folds and grooves is the pia mater. Pia mater is Latin for tender mother. It's an incredibly thin and delicate membrane that is fused to the brain tissue itself. It's like a gentle, form-fitting layer of silk, providing the final layer of immediate protection. So we have the tough mother, the spidery mother, and the tender mother, all working together to swaddle the brain. But the real genius of the system lies in the space between 2 of these layers specifically. Between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater, This space is called the subarachnoid space, and it isn't empty. It is filled with a special crystal-clear fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. The CSF is the brain's personal moat and shock absorber. The brain literally floats in this fluid. This buoyancy is critically important. Your 3-pound brain, suspended in CSF, effectively has a net weight of only about 2 ounces. This massive reduction in weight prevents the brain from being crushed under its own gravity and provides an incredible cushion. When you move your head suddenly, the fluid slows down the brain's movement, preventing it from slamming into the skull with full force. It's a natural hydraulic suspension system. But the CSF does more than just protect. It's also a crucial part of the brain's life support system. It circulates all around the brain and down the spinal cord, delivering nutrients and removing waste products. In fact, recent research has revealed a fascinating process that happens while we sleep. The channels in the brain that carry CSF seem to expand, allowing the fluid to flush out metabolic toxins that build up during our waking hours. This is like a nightly power wash for your brain, and it's another reason why sleep is so essential for brain health. Its lymphatic system is the brain's private sanitation department. The CSF is constantly being produced by specialized tissue inside the brain's inner chambers, called ventricles, and it's constantly being reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. This creates a steady, circulating flow of fresh fluid. So when you put it all together, you have an incredible multi-layered defense system. You have the hard, bony helmet of the skull. Inside that, you have the 3 protective membranes of the meninges. And within those membranes, you have the brain floating weightlessly in a bath of cerebrospinal fluid that both cushions it from shock and cleanses it of waste. It is a fortress within a fortress, a testament to how evolution has prioritized the protection of our most vital organ. Every component is perfectly designed to ensure that the delicate universe inside your head can continue its work, safe and sound. We've toured the entire brain, from its highest functions to its deepest foundations, from its cells to its defenses. We've seen how it thinks, feels, moves, and survives. But what's next? What does the future hold for our understanding of this amazing organ? For our final part, we're going to look ahead. And so we arrive at the end of our grand tour. We've journeyed through the intricate landscape of the human brain, from the executive functions of the frontal lobe to the life-sustaining beat of the brainstem. We've seen the graceful coordination of the cerebellum, the emotional fire of the limbic system, and the cinematic magic of the occipital lobe. We've zoomed in on the lightning-fast communication of neurons and the chemical ballet of the synapse. We've even explored the incredible fortress that keeps it all safe. We've covered a lot of ground. And yet, the most honest thing I can say to you right now is this: we've barely scratched the surface. The brain remains the greatest mystery in science. It is the final frontier. We have a map, yes? We know the names of the continents and some of the major cities. But we still know so little about the lives of the inhabitants, about the culture, the language, the society that thrives within this 3-pound universe. The single biggest unanswered question, the Mount Everest of neuroscience, is the problem of consciousness itself. How does all this electrical firing and chemical signaling in a chunk of fatty tissue give rise to subjective experience? How does it create the feeling of redness and the color red, the sound of a C-sharp, the feeling of joy, the awareness that you are you? This is what's known as the hard problem of consciousness, and we are still a very, very long way from solving it. We can see the brain's activity correlated with a conscious experience, but we can't explain how the first creates the second. It's the ultimate mystery. But the future of brain science is incredibly exciting. We are living in a golden age of discovery. Technologies like functional MRI, fMRI, and electroencephalography, IG, are allowing us to watch the brain in action with ever-increasing detail. New techniques in genetics and molecular biology are letting us trace the brain's circuits with unprecedented precision. We are learning more about the brain now than at any other point in human history. This explosion of knowledge holds immense promise. The better we understand the brain's anatomy and function, the better we can treat its diseases. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, depression, schizophrenia, epilepsy, stroke, these are some of the most devastating conditions known to humankind. Every discovery we make, Every new pathway we map brings us one step closer to developing effective treatments and, hopefully, cures for these conditions that affect billions of people worldwide. We are also venturing into territory that was once the realm of science fiction. The field of brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, is rapidly advancing. Scientists are developing devices that can read brain signals and use them to control computers or prosthetic limbs. This has already allowed paralyzed individuals to regain movement and communication. In the future, these technologies could blur the line between mind and machine, potentially augmenting human memory, intelligence, and communication in ways we can barely imagine. As we conclude this journey, I hope you walk away with a profound sense of awe. Awe for the sheer complexity and elegance of the organs sitting inside your own head. Every thought you have, every memory you cherish, every dream you chase, every silly joke you laugh at, it is all the product of this intricate biological masterpiece. It is the architect of your reality, the storyteller of your life, and the engine of your future. The study of the brain is not just an academic exercise. It is the ultimate act of self-discovery. Because in understanding the brain, we come one step closer to understanding ourselves, to understanding what it truly means to be human. The greatest frontier is not outer space. It is the 3-pound universe of inner space. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Now go out there and use yours well.